A millionaire husband walked out on his pregnant wife the moment her twins went into distress, leaving her bleeding on a hospital floor with nothing but his final text, "You're on your own." But as doctors fought to save her life, a stranger in the hallway heard her screams and stepped in with one quiet sentence that changed everything. "She's mine now." But what happened after he walked away, who stepped in, and what he claimed in her darkest moment was something no one in that hospital could ever forget. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Let's get started. Please, help, my babies. Vanessa Carter's voice cracked as she staggered through the doors of Street Mary's emergency department, one hand clamped beneath her belly, warm blood seeping through her dress. 32 weeks pregnant with twins, she barely stayed upright before collapsing against the reception desk. The nurse's head snapped up. One look at Vanessa's ashen face and trembling legs told her this wasn't early labor. It was a fight for survival. The nurse shouted for obstetrics, for a trauma cart, for anyone close enough to respond, and the hallway erupted into hurried footsteps and clipped commands. No one had time to breathe. "Where's your husband?" the nurse asked as they transferred Vanessa onto a rolling gurney. Vanessa's breath hitched. She couldn't form the words. Tears collected at the corners of her eyes as she shook her head. The nurse dialed the emergency contact listed on her chart. The phone rang, again and again, unanswered. The nurse tried a second time, then a third. Nothing. Not a single soul coming for her. As they rushed her down the hall, Vanessa's phone slipped from her hand. It hit the floor, screen lighting up with a new message that the nurse glimpsed before handing it back. 11 words that carved through the moment like a blade. "I'm in Cabo. Sign the divorce papers when I'm back. Handle it." The nurse froze for half a second, stunned by the cruelty, but the attending physician barked for help, and she forced herself to move. Inside the operating room, the monitors screamed warnings. Dr. Meredith Foster scanned Vanessa's vitals and felt her stomach drop, blood pressure crashing, platelets plummeting, liver markers signaling the onset of HELP syndrome. The twins' heart rates dipped dangerously with every contraction. "We need to deliver now," Dr. Foster said, already snapping on gloves. "If we don't, we lose all three." The team moved quickly, oxygen mask, IV lines, sterile drapes, anesthesia whispered urgently into her ear. Vanessa tried to stay awake, to fight, but consciousness slipped with every wave of pain. One floor above, in a conference room overlooking the ambulance bay, Ethan Gates closed a folder after a long meeting about NICU funding. He paused when the overhead speaker announced a code purple, obstetric emergency. His sister, Dr. Alexis Winfrey, was already pulling on a fresh coat. "Who is it?" Ethan asked. "A woman named Vanessa Carter," Alexis said. 32 weeks, twins, no insurance on file, no family here. She came in alone." Ethan stilled. Something in the way Alexis said alone hit him in a place he'd buried for decades. His mother had been alone once too, bleeding on a kitchen floor while a 5-year-old Ethan dialed 911 with shaking fingers. No one had come for her then. "Alexis," he said quietly, "if the hospital needs authorization for emergency coverage, use my name." She blinked, surprised. "Ethan, no one should face that kind of night alone." Down below, as Vanessa disappeared behind the operating room doors, Ethan watched through the glass. He didn't know her. He didn't know what had led her here. But something about the sight of her small, terrified, abandoned pulled at a vow he'd made a lifetime ago. Not again. Not if he could stop it. The twins came into the world in chaos. Baby A was pulled out first, tiny and slick, her cry thin but determined. Baby B followed seconds later, limp and blue, her chest barely rising as the NICU team descended with practiced urgency. At the same time, blood pooled beneath Vanessa, and Dr. Foster worked fiercely to control the hemorrhage. It was a race against time on two fronts. In admissions, the hospital system flagged Vanessa's insurance as inactive. Her financial file showed frozen accounts and denied authorizations. Before panic could ripple through the staff, a message pinged through the system. Emergency coverage approved. Authorized by Ethan Gates. Not a savior sweeping in. Just a man responding to a call the hospital made when no one else would. Hours later, Vanessa surfaced through the fog of anesthesia. The rhythmic beep of monitors steadied her breath as she blinked at the unfamiliar ceiling. Pain throbbed through her abdomen, heavy and sharp. She fought the haze until her vision focused and found a man sitting in the corner of the room. He didn't move toward her, didn't crowd her. He simply looked up, offered a quiet nod. "My name is Ethan," he said. "The hospital couldn't reach your husband. I authorized your emergency care so they could operate right away. Your daughters are in the NICU. They're small, but they're fighting." Vanessa's lips parted. "Dylan, where is he?" Ethan's expression shifted, gentle but careful. The hospital called several times. There was no response. He didn't mention the text. He didn't mention Cabo. He didn't mention the way the nurse had looked horrified reading the message. He protected her from that, at least for the moment. Her lashes fluttered as exhaustion dragged at her. But a memory surfaced, Dylan's face twisting in annoyance when she'd shown him their ultrasound just a week earlier. "These are your daughters," she had whispered. "Your daughters," he'd corrected coldly. "You're the one who let this happen." Then came the Cabo receipts shoved into her inbox by mistake. The confrontation, the suitcase, the front door slamming as he walked out. She never imagined he would go far enough to abandon her during labor. When she was stable enough to be wheeled to the NICU, Ethan followed several steps behind, hands in his pockets, giving her space. Through the glass she saw them, two impossibly tiny bodies cocooned in warmth and wires. Baby A's chest lifted in quick, shallow breaths. Baby B's fluttered with the help of a ventilator. Vanessa pressed her palm to the clear plastic wall, tears sliding silently. "She's so small," she whispered. "They're both fighters," Ethan said from behind her. "Stronger than they look." She didn't turn, but she heard something in his tone, a mix of memory and ache, something unspoken but deeply understood. Over the next 3 days, Ethan became a quiet constant. Nurses greeted him like a familiar face as he dropped off warm soup, a blanket, a phone charger, when hers died. Whenever she asked why, his answer remained the same. "Someone once helped my mother. I'm just passing it forward." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't romantic. It was steady, gentle, unintrusive. And it filled the cracks Dylan had left with something that felt dangerously like safety. Late on the third night, as the NICU hummed around them, Ethan stood by the window watching the twins breathe beneath their tiny hats. He spoke so softly she wasn't sure he meant for her to hear. "If no one else will stand by them, I will." Vanessa didn't respond. She couldn't, but something in her chest, torn, bruised, exhausted, shifted just enough to let in a flicker of warmth she hadn't felt in a very long time. The storm began with a single anonymous post. A NICU nurse, unable to shake the image of Vanessa being rushed through the emergency doors alone, typed out a short message on a medical forum. A mother of premature twins arrived hemorrhaging. No husband, no insurance. A stranger paid her hospital bill. No names, no photos. But the description was powerful enough to spark instant outrage. Within hours, the post spread across private groups, then public feeds, until a local reporter caught wind of it and began to investigate. He called Street, Mary's, asked harmless questions, pieced together fragments, and eventually discovered the name of the financial guarantor, Ethan Gates. A tech millionaire paying for a stranger's emergency surgery was a headline by itself. But when he cross-referenced Vanessa's name with public records and social media, something far worse surfaced. On Dylan West's page, a fresh set of photos appeared: sunlit beaches, champagne glasses, Ariana Monroe leaning against him at a Cabo resort. Time-stamped exactly when Vanessa was being wheeled into surgery, fighting for her life and the lives of their twins. The first article dropped that afternoon. Millionaire tech founder enjoys luxury vacation while wife delivers twins alone. It spread like wildfire, igniting a fury no PR team could contain. People demanded answers. They demanded accountability. They demanded to know how a man could abandon his pregnant wife in critical labor while posting poolside selfies with another woman. A second article followed within hours, this time with photos of Dylan and Ariana linked arm in arm on the resort balcony. Comment sections exploded. Investors paused deals. A major client suspended negotiations. Dylan's image, once polished and enviable, fractured overnight. In Cabo, Dylan scrolled through the news with rising panic. He cursed at the headlines, at the comments, at the reporter, and finally at Vanessa, because blaming her was easier than admitting the truth. He booked the next flight to Houston, chest tight with rage, convinced she had set him up to destroy his career. He never once asked if she had survived the surgery, never once asked if the twins were alive. His anger drowned out every trace of humanity left in him. When he stormed into Street Mary's, the NICU's quiet hum swallowed his footsteps. Vanessa sat beside Selena's incubator, skin pale, eyes tired but steady. Ethan stood a few feet away, speaking softly with a nurse. Dylan's voice pierced the calm. "You're ruining my career. Who did you talk to? Who told them?" His finger jabbed the air in Vanessa's direction, as if she were an employee who had missed a deadline. Vanessa flinched but didn't rise from her chair. Her gaze stayed on her daughters like they were the only thing tethering her to earth. Ethan turned, slow and deliberate, stepping forward just enough to shield her from Dylan's advance. "I'm the one the hospital contacted when they couldn't reach you," he said, his tone measured. "I approved her emergency coverage." "This has nothing to do with you," Dylan snapped. "This is my family." Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "You walked away from your family the second she begged you for help, and you ignored her." His eyes were unblinking, cold but controlled. "You left her during a medical crisis. You left her without insurance. You left her without support. You don't get to use the word family anymore." Dylan's face flushed with humiliation and fury. He took a step forward, but Ethan didn't move. The air tightened. Nurses froze. A doctor glanced toward security, and then Ethan spoke again quietly, but with a finality that left no room for misunderstanding. "Vanessa is no longer your concern. From the moment you abandoned her, she fell under my protection. She's safe now, and so are the girls." The sentence hung in the room like a verdict. Dylan looked around, expecting anyone to defend him. No one did. Not a single nurse met his eyes, not even Vanessa. She trembled, not from fear, but from the shock of someone finally standing between her and the man who had shattered her world. For the first time, Dylan understood he had already lost something deeper than a marriage or a reputation. He had lost the right to matter. He turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing down the hallway like the last remnants of a life collapsing behind him. In the stillness that followed, Vanessa sat before the incubators, letting her fingertips trace the cool surface of the glass as if it were the only way she could reach her daughters. Selena's tiny chest rose and fell in steady breaths, while Harper's movements were softer, more fragile. The machines beeped in the steady rhythm of survival, yet every sound pierced into her chest. She whispered their names under her breath, tasting the unfamiliar weight of motherhood mixed with terror. Ethan arrived early the next morning, carrying a small paper bag of warm, gentle food she might be able to stomach. He placed it beside her without comment and didn't linger over her shoulder. "Try to eat something," he said softly. "Just a little." She nodded, though her eyes stayed fixed on the babies. He didn't push. He never pushed. Instead, he settled into the chair a few feet away, giving her presence without pressure. When Alexis came in on rounds, she offered the update Vanessa desperately needed. Selena was responding well, stronger than expected for her gestational age. Harper was the fighter in the shadows, struggling, but refusing to give in. "Both girls are trying very hard," Alexis said, touching Vanessa's shoulder. "And you don't have to do any of this alone." Vanessa wanted to believe her, but loneliness clung to her ribs like something stitched inside. She shifted in her chair, and pain radiated from the incision where doctors had fought to save her life. She tried to hide it, but Ethan noticed. He stepped closer, yet kept a respectful distance. "You don't have to push through everything by yourself," he said. The gentleness in his voice almost broke her. Still, he didn't touch her. He didn't crowd her. He simply stood where she could draw strength if she needed it. What startled Vanessa most wasn't Ethan's presence, it was his restraint. He never asked about Dylan, never pried into the marriage she was still trying to understand herself. He didn't offer the hollow comfort people often give when they want to feel helpful. He simply showed up, morning after morning, quiet, steady, reliable. Then, late on the second night, the monitor beside Harper's bed erupted into a sharp alarm. Vanessa froze, breath catching as nurses rushed forward. Harper had stopped breathing. Alexis initiated the protocol with practiced urgency, and after a tense stretch of seconds, the tiny infant gasped back to life. Vanessa's knees nearly buckled. Ethan, who had been on his way out, ran back into the room and stopped behind her chair. He didn't touch her, just leaned close enough for his presence to hold her steady. "You're here," he whispered. "She knows you're here. She's fighting." Those words cracked something open inside her. Hours later, with the crisis past, she finally let the memories spill out, the blood, the panic, the call Dylan never answered. "I begged him," she whispered, and he turned off his phone. Ethan listened in silence, no judgment, no surprise. When she finished, he said only, "No one deserves that. Not you, not anyone." It wasn't pity, it was truth. At the end of the third day, the hospital administrator approached Ethan with updated billing documents from the NICU expansion fund he supported. He reviewed them quickly. "Label all additional charges under the anonymous donor program," he said. No exceptions. He didn't want Vanessa feeling indebted. He didn't want credit. He just wanted her burden lighter. The next morning, Vanessa walked into the NICU and found Ethan asleep in one of the stiff waiting chairs, head tilted back, jacket draped over him like a makeshift blanket. He hadn't gone home, not after Harper's episode. He had stayed because the thought of her facing another night alone had unsettled him too deeply. She watched him for a long moment, something warm and unfamiliar settling in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, "truly." To that, as the day settled into gentle rhythms of beeps, breaths, and soft footsteps, Vanessa found herself drifting between her daughter's incubators and the quiet figure who kept appearing at her side just often enough to matter. She looked at her girl's tiny, fierce survivors, then at Ethan through the NICU window. Family, she realized, wasn't always the one who promised forever. Sometimes it was the one who stayed when everyone else walked away. Dylan's downfall began in a conference room filled with the scent of stale coffee and panic. He sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, eyes bloodshot, while 3 attorneys flipped through the news articles that had detonated his reputation. Headlines blared from their screens. He didn't look at the words, he already knew what they said. He only cared about the damage. "We need to counterattack," he snapped. "File something. A lawsuit. Anything." One lawyer cleared his throat carefully, as if speaking too loud might shatter Dylan's remaining ego. "Mr. West, the facts are unfavorable. You were out of the country with Miss Dunner, Monroe, while your wife was admitted to the hospital in critical condition. That's indisputable." Dylan slammed his palm against the table. "She wants to destroy me. She leaked this. She's manipulating the media." The room fell silent. Even the attorneys paid to defend him didn't believe it. "Sir," another lawyer said gently, "your wife nearly died. She wasn't in a condition to leak anything." Dylan refused to hear it. His mind twisted every thread of truth into something that protected his pride. "She wants revenge. She's dramatic, needy, unstable. She knows how important the new investor round is. She did this on purpose." The lawyers exchanged glances. They had seen clients unravel before, but rarely with this level of delusion. Still, he was their client. So they began drafting motions. Motions accusing Vanessa of exaggeration, of emotional instability, of unfit decision-making. Motions demanding she vacate the River Oaks home he claimed as his property. Motions positioning him as the victim. On paper, Dylan still looked like a successful man fighting for control. In reality, he was drowning. At the hospital, Vanessa faced a very different kind of conversation. A social worker sat beside her, clipboard in hand, voice gentle but clinical. "You've undergone a major surgery," she said. "You have 2 infants in the NICU, and you currently have no active insurance or financial support. Is there anyone you consider your emergency contact?" Vanessa paused. Her mind cycled through the emptiness of her situation. No parents, no siblings, Dylan gone. And Ethan. Ethan was kind, but he wasn't hers to claim. "I'm managing," she whispered, though exhaustion trembled through every syllable. The social worker gave her a look of quiet concern. "We want to ensure you have a safe discharge plan. We may need to coordinate legal support as well, depending on your marital status and financial vulnerability." The words unsettled her. Legal support. Vulnerable. She hated that any of it described her. Later that morning, Alexis approached her with a message. "My brother asked me to check in," she said softly. "He wanted you to know that. If you'd like, he can connect you with a family law team. They're very good. He won't interfere otherwise." Vanessa blinked, startled. Ethan had been here every day, but he never crossed lines. He never acted like she owed him anything. The offer was a lifeline made of pure sincerity. "Tell him." She hesitated, then nodded. "Tell him I'll meet them." The meeting took place in a small consultation room. Vanessa, pale and still sore, sat across from two attorneys who treated her not as a fragile patient, but as a woman with agency. They reviewed her paperwork, the screenshots, the insurance cancellations, the dates of Dylan's withdrawals from their joint accounts. One lawyer looked up, expression turning steely. "What your husband did is legally and ethically severe," she said. "You have significant grounds for separation, custody, and financial restitution." A spark, small but powerful, lit inside Vanessa. For the first time since everything had collapsed, she felt the shape of something she had not felt in months. Control. "I'm ready," she said. "I want to protect myself. And my girls." That resolve was soon tested. When Dylan arrived at the hospital later that afternoon, he tried to stride toward the NICU as if nothing had changed. But security stepped in front of him. "Visitors must be approved," one guard said. Dylan bristled. "She's my wife. Those are my children." A nurse standing nearby spoke coldly, arms crossed. "You abandoned her during an emergency surgery. The mother has restricted your access. Please step back." Her words cut him faster than any headline. He puffed up, ready to argue, but every face in that hallway was against him. With nowhere to go except backward, he turned and stormed off, muttering threats under his breath. Inside, Vanessa heard the commotion and shut her eyes. She wasn't afraid. She was relieved. Her tears came quietly, cathartically, washing away remnants of the woman who once begged Dylan for love. When she opened her eyes, Ethan was standing a few feet away, expression calm but watchful. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I think," Vanessa exhaled shakily. "I think for the first time, I might be." Ethan nodded, his gaze full of quiet pride not for himself, but for her. Later, as they stood beside the incubators, Ethan looked at the baby's charts. "They still don't have names?" he asked gently. Vanessa shook her head. "I couldn't choose alone." Ethan hesitated before making the softest suggestion. "Maybe a temporary name, something warm, something to call them until you decide." She thought about it, then whispered, "Selena?" "For baby A." Ethan smiled. "And Harper?" "For baby B?" Vanessa repeated the name, letting it settle into her heart. "Harper," she murmured. "Yes, that's her." The moment wasn't romantic. It wasn't symbolic. It was simply human, two adults anchoring two fragile lives with names that felt like promises. That night, as Vanessa placed her hand against the incubator, she whispered a vow not born of fear anymore, but of fierce, rising strength. "No one will take you from me," she said to her daughters. "Not again, not ever." And for the first time she believed she had the power to keep that promise. The world outside Street Mary's turned into a hurricane. News outlets circulated the story relentlessly, each headline harsher than the last. Photos of Dylan laughing in Cabo beside Ariana became symbols of callousness. Commentators debated his morality. Strangers dissected Vanessa's life as if it were a public case study. Millionaire abandons pregnant wife during emergency labor. Tech founder caught celebrating beach vacation while twins fight for life. The narrative was brutally clear, and it wasn't in Dylan's favor. Within the NICU, Vanessa felt the ripples of the scandal as though they seeped through the walls. A nurse approached her tentatively, holding a tablet with supportive comments from mothers across the country. "You're stronger than you think," one wrote. "We're rooting for you," another said. Vanessa's throat tightened. "I don't want pity," she whispered. From behind her, Ethan spoke gently. "This isn't pity. People are angry because you were wronged. They're standing with you, not over you." 2 Meanwhile, reporters swarmed the hospital, leaving messages with administrators, trying to breach patient confidentiality rules. "We'd like a statement from Mrs. West," they repeated. The hospital denied every request, but the pressure grew. Even Vanessa's room felt smaller, the air tighter, as if she were being watched through invisible windows. Dylan didn't stay silent. He posted an apology online, not to Vanessa, but to those affected by misunderstandings. He claimed he didn't know she had gone into labor, that they had been separated for months, and that the media distorted the truth. His attempt to rewrite history backfired instantly. Internet users unearthed timestamps, flight records, his resort check-ins. A video leaked showing him toasting with Ariana the same hour Vanessa was being wheeled into surgery. Dylan deleted the post minutes later, but screenshots lived forever. At the hospital, Ethan convened a brief meeting with the PR team. "Vanessa cannot be approached," he said firmly. "Protect her identity, secure her floor. Any unauthorized press is to be removed immediately." The hospital administrator nodded. "Agreed. She's under our privacy protocol." But the administrator didn't say what everyone on staff already knew. Ethan's influence, reputation, and funding made compliance effortless. As days passed, Vanessa's exhaustion deepened. Her incision throbbed. Sleep eluded her. She hovered between worry for Harper, relief over Selena's progress, and the suffocating awareness of the world watching her unwitting tragedy. One evening, after a long stretch by the incubators, her legs buckled slightly as she stood. Ethan stepped forward, but again, he didn't touch her. "You need rest," he said quietly. "I'll sit outside. If you wake up and need anything, I'll be there." His words weren't a rescue, they were a reassurance she desperately needed. Hours later, Harper managed several steady breaths without assisted oxygen. It was a milestone so small the world outside wouldn't notice, but to Vanessa, it felt like witnessing a miracle. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she pressed her palm to the glass. "You're so strong," she whispered. "Stronger than me." Selena shifted in her sleep, as if echoing the fragile victory. Ethan watched the moment from beside her, and without saying a word, his presence steadied her trembling. The temporary peace didn't last. The next morning, Vanessa checked her email and found a message from Dylan. His subject line read, "Clarification." The body was worse. He claimed he regretted going to Cabo, but insisted she should have communicated her medical condition more clearly. He wrote that the media frenzy was unfair to both of them, and that she should avoid escalating this any further. No remorse for the fear he caused, no mention of their daughters, just an attempt to salvage his image by pushing blame back onto her. Vanessa stared at the email for 3 long seconds before deleting it without replying. She felt nothing but clarity. Later that day, her attorneys arrived with new evidence. "We traced financial records," one lawyer explained. "Your husband began transferring assets out of your joint accounts weeks before your hospitalization. That shows premeditation. It strengthens your case significantly." Vanessa exhaled, feeling the weight shift once more in her favor. The attorney continued, "This will help with custody and financial protection. You're in a powerful position." For the first time, Vanessa didn't feel like the powerless party in her own life. That night, standing by the incubators, Ethan watched the soft glow of the monitors illuminate Vanessa's face. Selena slept soundly. Harper's breaths were steadier. Vanessa's shoulders were no longer hunched in defeat, they held a quiet resolve. Ethan lowered his voice as if speaking to the room itself. "He's coming," he said. "He won't let this go quietly, but you won't face anything alone." Outside, the media storm raged louder than ever. Inside, a different kind of storm prepared to break one that would pull Dylan, Vanessa, and Ethan into the same room again, only this time with the truth laid bare and the balance of power forever shifted. By the time the 7th day dawned, the hospital no longer felt sealed off from the outside world. A cluster of reporters hovered just beyond the sliding front doors, cameras already powered on, microphones up and waiting. Security kept them from crossing the line, but their presence bled into the building like cold air. On the NICU floor, Vanessa heard her name before she saw anything. It floated in from the elevator bay, attached to words like scandal and abandoned. Her pulse spiked. For a second, the walls seemed to inch closer, the air thinner. She took one tentative step toward the hallway, then froze when she caught sight of a camera lens angled in her direction through the small window at the far end. Ethan stepped into view, as if he'd been waiting for this exact moment. He moved in front of the window, blocking the camera's line. "Don't look at them," he said quietly, turning his head just enough that only she could hear. "I'll handle it." The reassurance steadied her. She nodded and drew back, closer to the NICU doors, where the beeping of monitors felt safer than the hum of the outside world. Minutes later, the elevator doors slid open again. Dylan emerged in a dark suit, his tie knotted too tight, his lawyer at his side. His posture was pure bravado, chin high, expression carved into a mask of offended dignity. He walked like he still believed the building belonged to him. The lawyer approached the nurse's station first. "My client is here to exercise his parental rights," he announced. "He'd like to see his children and speak with his wife." Dewberry, the charge nurse, a woman with years of NICU nights etched into the lines around her eyes, didn't flinch. The mother has placed restrictions on visitors, she said. Any contact has to go through her legal team. Dylan scoffed. She's my wife. Those are my children. He moved toward the NICU doors anyway. Before he could push them open, 2 security guards stepped in front of him, palms raised. You can't go in without authorization, one said firmly. She's trying to take my kids away, Dylan snapped, voice rising. She's turning everyone against me. A nurse nearby, the same one who'd watched Vanessa arrive alone that first night, spoke up. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. You weren't here when they were born, she said. Don't act like you've been. Something in Dylan's facade cracked. He inhaled sharply, eyes flashing, and for a moment it looked like he might shove past security. Before the situation could explode, Ethan stepped out from the NICU corridor, shoulders squared but face calm. There's no point doing this out here, Ethan said. There's an empty conference room down the hall. Let's not turn this hallway into a spectacle. Dylan's lawyer seized the opportunity, nodding curtly. Fine. They filed into the small room, the lawyer, Dylan, Ethan, and a moment later, one of Vanessa's attorneys who had been on standby. The door clicked shut behind them, cutting off the distant hum of machines. The air inside was thick with unspoken accusations. You've got some nerve, Dylan started, pointing at Ethan. Throwing money around so you can play hero. Trying to steal my family for a good headline. Ethan leaned back in his chair, unruffled. What family are you talking about? He asked. The one you left behind when your wife was bleeding and your daughters were in distress? Or the one by the pool in Cabo? Dylan's jaw clenched. You don't know anything about my marriage. I know you didn't answer your phone, Ethan replied, voice level. I know she came in alone. I know the hospital found her insurance canceled and her accounts empty. I know you married someone else while she was on an operating table. Dylan shot to his feet. I never agreed to those babies, he spat. I told her I didn't want them. She trapped me with that pregnancy. Ethan's eyes hardened. They're still your children, he said softly. You had the right to be scared, to be angry. You never had the right to disappear. Dylan laughed bitterly. You think money makes you better than me? I can buy my way back from this. Judges care about stability, not sob stories. That's where you're wrong, Ethan answered. Money doesn't erase what you did, and it won't make your daughters forget who was there when they were fighting to breathe. The door opened and Vanessa's lawyer stepped in, a folder in hand. Mr. West, she said, nodding briefly, we've compiled evidence for the custody hearing. Your withdrawals from the joint account, the timing of the insurance cancellation, your location records, while Mrs. West was admitted. It paints a very clear picture. This is harassment, Dylan snapped. She can't take my kids from me. 80 and self. She isn't taking anything, the lawyer replied coolly. You gave it up when you chose Cabo over the delivery room. The court will be very interested in why you made that choice. Dylan's confidence faltered. For the first time since he'd landed, he looked less like a wronged husband and more like a cornered man. His gaze darted between Ethan and the attorney, searching for an ally and finding none. Vanessa has every right to protect herself and her daughters, the lawyer finished. Dylan glared at Ethan. You did this, he hissed. You and your money. You and your act. Ethan rose slowly, meeting his stare head-on. Vanessa didn't take your family, he said. You threw them away. All I did was catch what you dropped. Security escorted Dylan back toward the elevators as reporters swarmed the building's entrance, shouting his name. He turned his fury on them instead. She and that guy are destroying me, he shouted. You're all eating up lies. The cameras rolled, capturing every desperate word. Each one chipped further at the image he was so desperate to salvage. When Ethan returned to the NICU, the stress of the confrontation showed in the faint shadows beneath his eyes, but his voice was steady. Vanessa looked up from her daughter's incubators, worry flickering across her face. You didn't have to do that, she murmured. Ethan glanced at the twins, then at her. I'm just standing on the side, that's right, he said. She watched him walk to the window, where the monitors cast a soft blue glow over his back. For the first time, the word protector didn't feel like an exaggeration. It felt like the simple, irrefutable truth. The alarm over Harper's bed cut through the night like a siren in a tunnel. One moment the NICU was a low, steady hum of machines and soft footsteps. The next, it exploded into motion. Nurses converged on the tiny incubator as the monitor blared, red numbers dropping too fast. Alexis was at the bedside in seconds, adjusting tubes, issuing orders. Vanessa stood frozen just outside the cluster of bodies, her hands pressed to her mouth, her legs shaking so hard she thought they might buckle. The room blurred at the edges, sound narrowing to the frantic beep 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 that had become her worst nightmare. "Breathe, Harper," she whispered, voice cracking. "Please, baby, breathe." Someone touched her elbow, firm but gentle. Ethan appeared at her side, his face etched with concern. He guided her to a chair, easing her down before her knees gave out. For the first time, he let his hand rest on her shoulder, warm and steady. "You're not alone in this," he said quietly. "Not tonight, not ever again." Those words anchored her. She focused on them, on the weight of his hand, on the fact that someone was sharing this terror with her instead of watching from a distance. Seconds stretched into a lifetime before Harper's tiny chest rose again. The alarm softened, then settled. The nurse's shoulders dropped in unison as the crisis passed. "She's stabilizing," Alexis said after a tense few minutes. "We'll keep a very close eye on her, but she's still fighting." The NICU slowly returned to its strange, mechanical peace. Vanessa and Ethan remained where they were, side by side in the spill of pale fluorescent light, too wired to move and too exhausted to leave. Hours slid by as the night pressed on, long and heavy. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, words finally began to pour out of Vanessa, not in frantic bursts, but in slow, measured confessions. She spoke about the first time Dylan changed the passwords on their accounts, the way he called her dramatic when she cried, the humiliation of having her card declined at a prenatal appointment, the creeping realization that love had turned into control, and control into abandonment. "I kept thinking if I just did everything right, he'd go back to who he was in the beginning," she said, eyes on Harper's fragile chest. "Every time he pulled away, I tried harder. I kept shrinking myself so he wouldn't feel crowded." Ethan listened without interrupting. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Not just for what he did this week. For every moment he made you feel small." She swallowed. "Did your dad do that to your mom?" Ethan's gaze dropped to the floor, distant for a moment. "My father left when my mom was pregnant with my sister," he said. "No money, no insurance. I remember her collapsing in the kitchen, bleeding, and I didn't know what to do. I was 5. I thought if I pressed enough buttons on the phone, someone would come. It worked. Barely. She lived, but she was never the same. Neither was I." He looked up again, meeting Vanessa's eyes. "I promised myself I'd never stand by and watch that happen to anyone else. Not if I had any power to change it." Quote. She stared at him through the dim light, something clicking into place. "That's why you're here," she said softly. "Not because you feel sorry for me. Because you remember. Because I know what it does to a kid," he replied. He glanced through the glass at the twins. "They deserve better than a father who walks away when it's hard. They deserve someone who chooses them every day, without conditions." Vanessa followed his gaze. Selena lay curled like a comma, her tiny fists tucked under her chin. Harper's breathing was still faint but less labored. For the first time, as she watched Ethan watching them, she saw a shape forming around the 4 of them, uneven, unfinished, but undeniably like a family. "Why do you care about them so much?" she asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. He thought for a long moment. "Because I know what it feels like to be unwanted," he said quietly. "And I know what it means when someone finally decides you're worth staying for. These girls didn't ask to be part of any of this. If I can be one more person in their corner, that's what I'm going to be." Silence settled between them, but it was no longer heavy. It was full of shared understanding, of unspoken promises, of something fragile and new. Vanessa's head began to nod as exhaustion crept up on her. Without thinking, she leaned sideways, her temple finding the edge of Ethan's shoulder. He went still, then relaxed, careful not to move too quickly. He didn't shift away. He didn't read into it. He simply let her rest there, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. From the doorway, Alexis paused, taking in the sight of her brother sitting rigid but protective, Vanessa asleep against him, and 2 tiny girls breathing behind glass. A small smile touched her lips before she quietly backed away. She had never seen Ethan stay in a hospital overnight willingly. Yet here he was, rooted to the spot as if leaving were no longer an option. At some point in the early hours, he slipped off his jacket and draped it gently over Vanessa's shoulders. shielding her from the chill of the NICU air. "Sleep," he murmured. "I'm not going anywhere." When dawn finally crept in, soft light spilling into the unit, Vanessa stirred. She blinked, disoriented, then realized where her head had been resting and who was still beside her. Ethan sat in the same position, eyes tired, hair slightly mussed, hand resting near her arm as if ready to steady her at the slightest wobble. "You stayed," she said, her voice rough from sleep. He gave a small, almost sheepish shrug. Seemed like a bad night to leave. She looked from him to her daughters, then back again. "You've saved me more than you realize," she whispered. He held her gaze, a hint of something deeper flickering there. "This is just the beginning," he said, and for the first time since her world had fallen apart, Vanessa believed that maybe, just maybe, what came next didn't have to be defined by what had broken her but by who had chosen to stay. Vanessa stood before the mirror in the quiet family room outside the NICU, smoothing the front of her simple black dress. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steadier than they had been in months. Her attorney beside her said softly, "Today isn't just about you, it's for the girls." Vanessa nodded, inhaling deeply. When she stepped into the hallway, Ethan was waiting. He didn't move closer, didn't crowd her, just offered the same steady presence she had come to trust. "Do you want me inside?" he asked. Vanessa met his eyes. "Just be here." It was all she needed. The courthouse buzzed with reporters when she arrived. Dylan walked in moments later with a new lawyer, chin high, arrogance fighting desperately with panic. Ariana lingered behind him, sunglasses on, looking smaller than she ever had online. Dylan didn't look toward Vanessa once. When the hearing began, Judge Michelle Roberts flipped through the file, her expression darkening with each page. Vanessa's attorney presented the evidence. The text Dylan sent during her emergency, the bank transfers draining their joint accounts, the canceled insurance, the Cabo photos time-stamped during her surgery. The judge's jaw tightened. Vanessa took the stand. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. "I'm not here to punish him," she said quietly. "I only want my daughters to grow up with someone who won't walk away from them the way their father walked away from me." The room went silent. Dylan's turn unraveled quickly. His excuses, miscommunication, stress, career pressure, collapsed the moment Judge Roberts asked, "Where were you when your wife was taken into emergency surgery?" His attorney tried to intervene, but the evidence was already in her hands. 9 unanswered calls from the hospital. Then came the final strike. Vanessa's lawyer presented documentation showing Ethan bearing the emergency costs. "This court is not declaring Mr. Gates as their father," she clarified. "But it should not ignore that a stranger did more for this family in one night than the husband legally obligated to them." Dylan's face flamed with humiliation. Judge Roberts issued her ruling without hesitation. Full custody to Vanessa, supervised visitation only if Dylan requested it. Then she added a final option, one that stunned the room. Mr. West may voluntarily terminate his parental rights if he does not wish to fulfill the responsibilities of fatherhood. Pride, spite, and fear twisted together in Dylan's expression. He signed, one angry stroke of a pen, and he severed himself from the children he had never once held. Outside the courthouse, the wind felt cooler, the sky clearer. Vanessa stepped out, trembling but lighter, like something inside her had finally loosened. Ethan walked to her calmly and opened the car door, his gaze soft. "You don't have to fight alone anymore," he said. For the first time, Vanessa leaned into him willingly, letting herself rest in a place that finally felt safe. The twins' first birthday was loud, messy, imperfect, and perfect. Vanessa's new home wasn't grand, but it was warm, humming with laughter and the smell of homemade cupcakes. Selena toddled across the grass, chasing bubbles, while Harper clung to Ethan's pant leg, her favorite perch. Alexis arrived with gifts. Doctor, Foster with cookies, and 2 nurses from NICU came just to see how far the girls had come. Vanessa watched them from the patio, arms folded lightly over her chest, pride glowing in her eyes. Ethan lifted Harper into his arms, and Selena raced toward him with frosting on her cheeks. Alexis nudged Vanessa playfully. "Those girls love him more than anyone," she teased. Vanessa blushed but didn't deny it. Later, while the twins demolished their cakes, Ethan stood beside her, voice low. "I didn't know I could love children who aren't biologically mine this much." Vanessa turned toward him, heart tightening at the honesty in his tone. She slipped away briefly and returned with a small envelope. "I've been holding on to this," she said, handing it to him. Inside was a petition for legal guardianship. Ethan froze. "You've been their father from the beginning," Vanessa whispered. "Now I just want it to be official." At City Hall a week later, the girls clapped as the judge declared, "Ethan James Gates is hereby recognized as the legal father of Selena and Harper Carter Gates." Ethan bowed his head, overcome, and wrapped both girls in his arms. Outside on the steps, sunlight warming their shoulders, Vanessa and Ethan lingered behind the others. He looked at her gently. "You don't owe me anything. I didn't help you expecting." She cut him off softly. "I don't need someone perfect. I need someone who stays." Ethan exhaled, a tremor of emotion crossing his face. "I chose you the night you walked into that hospital," he said, "and I never stopped choosing you." She took his hand, her choice, her pace, her courage. Weeks later, on a quiet morning, Vanessa stood in the kitchen watching Ethan flip pancakes shaped like hearts. Selena and Harper giggled at the table, syrup on their hands, sunlight streaming over their curls. Vanessa rested a hand on her stomach. 8 weeks. A new heartbeat, a new beginning. Ethan turned and caught her smiling. He pressed a gentle palm over her hand. "Our family's getting bigger," he whispered. Outside, the girls ran through the yard, laughter rising into the warm air. Inside, Vanessa leaned into the doorway, watching the man who had once been a stranger become the safest place she had ever known. Sometimes family isn't something you're born into. Sometimes it's the people who walk into your life when everything breaks and choose to stay while you rebuild. On quiet days like this, when the air feels a little softer and the world finally stops rushing, you're reminded that life doesn't always fall apart to break you. Sometimes it falls apart so you can rebuild it with hands that know their own strength. What's lost isn't the ending. It's the clearing for something kinder to grow. If this story found you at the right moment, maybe on a late-night drive, or while the rain taps softly on your window, tell me what part stayed with you. I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories that sit close to the heart, feel free to subscribe. Your presence here means more than you know.